Excel is a suite of more powerful tools, functions, and capabilities. We normally use it as a tool to analyze or organize data. For example, for summarizing data, you can use Excel to summarize your data very easily. We can also use Excel as data visualization tool. As you know, pictures speak louder than words, right? So in the same way, we can use, for example, charts or graphs to visualize our data. The advantage of Excel doesn't stop here. It also enhances the capabilities of the other Office tools like PowerPoint and Word. So for example, after preparing your document using these tools, and there are times where you need additional features that you don't find in this software tools. That is when Excel comes as a rescuer. You can read the example here. So this is the reason why most people consider Excel as a Swiss knife because of its usefulness and adaptability. Excel is a tool with many uses. You can use it as a data store, like a database, to store various kinds of data. We can also use it to process data, the data that we stored, filtering data, or we can add some calculations to make more meaning of the data. We can also apply various statistical functions that come with Excel. Another interesting feature of Excel is presenting data visualization. So we can use charts, for example, to display proportions of a whole, like pie chart. There are also advanced uses of Excel. For example, managers use Excel for making important decisions. We can also use Excel to help us with what-if analysis, for example, in the case of problem solving. So this is the main screen that you see when you open Excel. The main difference with other Office applications is that the working space is not like one blank screen where you have a cursor, click, and start writing. Rather, it's a worksheet. It's called worksheet. By the way, the file is workbook. In Excel, a file is called workbook. It contains several worksheets. So a worksheet is like a two-dimensional table of cells. So a worksheet is made of columns, several of them, and rows. By the way, as an assignment, I want you to find out how many columns and how many rows there are in a worksheet. That tells you the number of cells. So in Excel, we can store different kinds of data. We can store text, we can store numbers, we can store calculations. Each cell has a name or an address, which is made up of the column and row identifiers. So for example, this cell is F4 because it's on column F and row 4. So you can refer to a cell by its address, pressing calculations as shown here. So, like I said, a spreadsheet file, which is called a workbook, contains at least one worksheet. Each worksheet contains a two-dimensional grid of cells. So, in cells, we can store text, numbers, and calculations. Cells display the values that we enter into them differently. For example, cells containing text and numbers, they always display the value that we enter, like text or number, although they are aligned differently. Whereas cells containing formulas always display the result of the formula, not the formula itself. We see the result in the cell. Cells display their values using formatting options. Some of the formatting options include color, font choice, borders, and the like. So you can also control how numbers are displayed. The number 0.75 can be formatted as a percentage, then it shows 75%, the same value. The value is the same, but the display is different. The same number can be formatted to show currency amounts. So in this case, it has attached a meaning, so which means 75 cents a rand or 75 cents of a dollar. You can also formatted to show fewer decimal places, which means rounded up to 0.8 from 0.75. Or you can increase the number of decimal places by adding more decimal places. Let's discuss about formulas. A formula can be very simple or very complex, but we need to learn a few details to use formulas successfully. There will be another lecture, entire lecture about formulas, but here we'll just briefly discuss about formulas. So the first thing that we need to do to store a formula in a cell is to type an equal sign. So a formula should start with an equal sign. So when we enter a formula in a cell, the cell doesn't display the formula, but instead the result is displayed in the cell. So like I said earlier, if a cell, for example, that contains a formula, this cell contains this formula. So the cell displays a value, not the formula. In Excel, we don't use the typical multiplication and division symbols. Instead, we use asterisk in place of multiplication and slash in place of division. This is a screenshot from my Excel sample file. So entering this formula is D10 times D11. So which means multiply the value of D10 by the value of D11, not D10 as such. In the formula, when the formula is calculated, the value stored in D10 and the value stored in D11 will be considered when Excel calculates this formula. That's the reason why we see 250. If I have a formula like D12 slash D11 means divide the value of D12 by the value of D11, where the result will be 10, because this is D11 and this is D12, which is 250. So why do you think we use cell addresses instead of values like this in our formula? We'll discuss more about this in the next lecture. Function is actually a predefined formula that perform calculation using specific values in particular order. So for example, instead of writing this formula to add these four numbers, I could use actually a predefined function which is called sum and give it the numbers that I want to add, like this. I can say sum 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it will give me the result, the same result that I got when I use this formula. So in the same way, instead of giving the input for a formula, the input is always what? The numbers, the values or address of cells that contain the values. So instead of giving the actual values, I can also give as an input the range of cells. We use the range operator. Colon is a range operator. So here, what I'm saying is add the numbers that are stored in D10, D11, and D12. So it will produce the result like this. It will display the result. So what the sum function does is it accepts as an input, it accepts numbers or the address of cells that contains the numbers, and it produces the sum of all inputs. So like I said, there are multiple functions that come with Excel. And whenever we want to do something more complex, we can write formulas that include functions. Remember that a formula always starts with an equal sign, even if we use functions. The input frame. So in addition to the mouse pointer, there is also an input frame. A cell that has the input frame is called the active cell. So when we want to enter a value or a formula, we have to move the input frame to a cell that we want to enter the content. So we do this by clicking, pointing and clicking. We can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So whatever you type will be stored in that cell. If the cell already contains a data, whatever we are typing will overwrite it. But if that is not what we are intending to do, we can press escape, or we can also use undo like what we have always been doing. On the other hand, clicking on the edge and moving the cell to a different place will move the content of this active cell. On the other hand, the input frame has also a handle, this thing at the bottom right corner. So clicking on the handle and dragging either horizontally or vertically down along the column will autofill the cells you drag over with the content of the cell you are dragging. So if this cell has a numeric value, then Excel will try to detect if there is a regular sequence. Like for example, if I write 2020 and drag, Excel may think that I want to create a series of values 2021, 2022, etc. On the other hand, if this contains a formula, especially formulas that contain cell reference, then when we drag down or horizontally, Excel intelligently updates any cell references that we used in this formula to relate to the cells that we are copying. So in general, whenever you are asked to apply a formula to an entire row or a column, then you have to use the autofill. Like I said, Excel will copy the formula, not the values. So the formulas will adjust automatically. Data entry with the input line. On the toolbar above the worksheet area, the line, the input, there is a bar which is called input line. Normally, it displays the content of the current cell. We can also type directly into this line to enter data in a cell. Especially it's useful for entering long numbers, text information, and complicated formulas. It's also easy to edit what we typed in a cell in the input line. The advantage with this one is it's unaffected by your current zoom setting. Whatever a cell contains, it may not be shown in the cell, but you can see whatever is entered in the cell in the input line. So, which can be very useful. For this purpose, we always need to see what is stored in a cell looking at the input line. So, to enter data through the input line, we click once to place the input frame on a cell, and then click on the input line to begin entering data. The input line is also called formula bar because we see the formula in the input line while a cell displays the result of a formula. So this is the input line. I also said it's a formula bar. So whatever you type into the input line gets inserted into the currently selected cell, which is also called active cell. Excel has default data formatting for the different data types we have. And as we enter data, it attempts to decide what kind of data we are entering and applies the appropriate formatting conditionally once we press the enter key. So accordingly, numbers and dates are formatted with right alignment. Leading zeros, as in this one, gets removed and producing this kind of digits. All other entries are left aligned. You need to enter a number or a formula that needs to be treated as a text. You can type the single quote before entering the number or the formula. So whenever we need a number or a formula to be treated as a text, the first item in our data should be the single quote. You will need to do this in the first part. There are times when a cell contains too much information than it is sized to display the data. In such a case, we can fix this problem in several ways. We can drag the right-hand side of the column header to resize all the cells in that column. We can also double-click where we dragged to have Excel do the resizing automatically for us. Let's see this in action. For example, as you can see here, A1 contains this information. But A1, the size of A1 is this, like this. So the other information is displayed because the adjacent cells have nothing to display. So A1, the content of A1 overflows into the adjacent cells. But if there was something that was entered here, it would have been different. So as you can see, A1 contains this information, but it doesn't display everything that it has. So in such a case, we need to adjust size that can make the sales content in this column to be displayed like this easily. We can also do the same thing. We can double click this one and Excel automatically adjusts the column width for us. So when we double click, Excel actually finds the longest entry in this column and adjusts the column width accordingly. So we can do the same thing for C1. As you can see, the text overflows and I can just double click. So you can also set the cell to wrap text, which solves the overlap by keeping the cell the same width but increasing the row height. I double click this one, the column adjusts to the longest entry. But there are times when I don't want that to happen. I only want to adjust this cell. So in such a case, what we can do is like we format the cell and align, go to the format cells, align and wrap text so that the cell entry will be wrapped. If we have free space, we can also merge cells together to display a larger item. This is the same feature that you can find in Microsoft Word. While entering a formula, if we mistype or make some kind of mistake, Excel will alert us with a pop-up window. The cell will also display an error message instead of the result. Because the formula cannot be calculated because of the error and there is no result to display. We'll look at this kind of problems tomorrow in tomorrow's session. You are probably quite used to the ribbon by now, but just in case, here is a refresher. So similar to the other Office applications, Microsoft Word, for example, we have the main navigation tabs. These are the main navigation tabs. So, for example, to do something related to file processing, for example, opening a file, saving a file, or printing a file, we use the File tab. And we use the Insert tab to insert items such as tables, charts, text. We also use the Page Layout tab to tasks such as setting up a page, arranging a page. And we use the Formula tab to access the many functions that come with Excel. And the Data tab is actually used to analyze data, to get data, to sort data, to forecast data. The View menu is used to change the views of our document. For example, we can zoom in and we can zoom out. We can also change windows. And similar to the other Office applications, the Home tab is a home for the most often used tools. The ribbon is gathering related tools together. And we see the names of a particular group at the bottom. There are labels that specify what this group is all about. For example, these are commands related to font, and these are commands related to alignment, which actually contain cell display options. And these are number formatting options. The advantage with Microsoft Excel or other Office applications is that you don't need to memorize what each tool is all about. You can leave the arrow over any of these icons for a couple of seconds and a prompt will pop up to tell you what it does. So for example, if I point to any icon and leave it there for a couple of seconds, so Excel will prompt a pop-up window to tell me what this icon is all about. So these are some of keyboard tips which are important for editing and formatting purpose. So if you want to edit a data, if you make a mistake and want to edit the data in a cell, you need to press F2, which you can find at the top of the keyboard. So when you press F2, you will get a cursor, which is similar to the one you have seen in Microsoft Word. You can then use arrow keys to move the cursor around and change the digits or the letters entered in that cell. There are tips to speed up entering data. When you enter data, you can press one of these two keys. After you finish entering your data, if you press tab, this will finish the current data entry and move the current one cell to the right. Whereas if after entering your data in a cell, if you press enter, then it will finish the current data entry and move the input cursor one cell down. While the cursor is somewhere, if you press delete, then it will delete the data, but not the formatting. You need to remember this. So pressing delete will delete the data, not the formatting. So the cell will remain with its current formatting. So if you enter another data, then that data will be formatted with the formatting that was stored in that cell. On the other hand, backspace will delete anything in the cell, including formatting and the data. To be a power user, I advise you to learn these keyboard shortcuts. So please study them, please practice them. They will make you to be a power user. Spell checking. So we can also check the spelling of our data in a worksheet, but the spell checking only checks the current worksheet. So if we have several worksheets in a file, in a workbook, you can run the spell checker on once for each worksheet. So to access the spell checking, we have to press F7 or we have to get command from the proofing, review, proofing, and spelling. Let me quickly explain what I discussed in this class. So I said text is aligned in the left. So all texts are, as you can see, they are left aligned, whereas numbers are right aligned. On the other hand, if you want to edit the content of a cell, you can use the input line. When you click the input, in the input line, you can see the cursor. Then you can use the arrow key, or you can even click anywhere. You can also press F2 to get the cursor in the cell, inside the cell. Another thing that we discussed is formulas. So we said a formula displays a result, whereas the formula bar or the input line or the formula bar displays the formula. So if I want to modify the formula, I can click here or I can press F2 and get the cursor here.